I've kept this to myself for more than 70 years, and even now my hands tremble as I type. Time has a way of softening most memories, but not this one. This one stayed sharp, like a stone in my boot I could never shake out. I suppose I'm writing it here because I'm running out of years, and I'd rather someone heard it than let it die with me. There's a truth about war I only learned too late. Sometimes the worst things you carry home aren't what you did, but what you didn't do. I didn't understand that in 1944. Back then, I still believed every choice had a clean answer if you just followed orders and kept your head down. I know now that's a lie, or at least it was for me. I served with the 79th Infantry Division during the push through northern France. If you look at the history books, you'll see dates, lines on maps, units advancing. None of that will tell you what it smelled like after rain on churned soil, or how the cold could creep into your bones, even in July. We moved from village to village, always tired, always hungry, always pretending we weren't afraid. There were 4 of us who usually walked together, but the one who mattered most in this story is Private First Class Daniel Kerr. Danny, though he hated being called that. He was from Ohio, a farm boy with calloused hands and a soft voice. He carried a bent silver watch his father had given him. Useless thing, didn't even keep time anymore. But he checked it every day like it meant something larger. Maybe it did. Sometimes I think that watch is the only reason I remember anything clearly. I should say this now. What happened wasn't his fault, and it wasn't entirely mine. But I was there, and I made a choice. And I've lived long enough to understand that excuses sound thin after a lifetime of silence. The beginning of it was a small village outside St. Lo. I won't name it because the people who lived there lost enough without me dragging their memory back into the light. We expected resistance, but what we found was worse. Emptiness, burned out houses, animals wandering loose, and that terrible quiet you only hear when even the birds seem to know something is wrong. Our lieutenant sent Kerr and me to check a farmhouse set a little apart from the road. It looked abandoned, but the door was shut tight, and there were fresh footprints in the mud. We didn't know if they belonged to Germans, French civilians, or someone else. We didn't know anything except that we had to find out. At the time, I didn't realize what that choice would cost. I can still see Kerr standing just ahead of me, touching that bent silver watch in his pocket before he pushed open the door. He always did that, said it steadied him. If I had stopped him then, if I'd said what I was thinking, well, maybe none of this would be worth confessing. But I didn't. I followed him inside. And what we found there's the part I've avoided remembering for most of my life. I'll tell you the rest, but not yet. I need to explain it right, or else it will sound like I'm trying to excuse myself. And I'm not. There's one thing in that farmhouse I still see when I close my eyes. I just wish I had done something different before it was too late. I wish I could tell you that when we stepped inside that farmhouse, we found something clear and simple, an enemy soldier, a trap, anything that would have given us a clean line between right and wrong. But war rarely gives you that mercy. The air inside was still and warm, the kind of warmth that doesn't feel welcoming so much as left behind. Dust floated in thin beams of light cutting through the broken shutters. On the table sat a half-finished meal, bread hardened at the edges, a mug of something dark, a knife resting across a wooden plate. Someone had been here not long before we arrived, someone who left in a hurry. Kara moved ahead of me, stepping lightly, his rifle raised. I remember the creak of the floorboards under my boots, louder than it should have been. Every sound felt like it could give us away, though we didn't know to whom. We checked the front room first. Empty. Then the kitchen. Empty. But when we reached the narrow hallway that led to the back bedrooms, Kerr paused. He didn't say anything. He just held up his hand, the signal to stop. His other hand drifted to that silver watch again, like a reflex. The door at the end of the hall was closed, too deliberately closed. I could see the faint outline of a shadow under it. I leaned close and whispered, "Could be civilians." He nodded. "Could be," he whispered back, though the tension in his shoulders told me he didn't believe it. There was a part of me, small, but there, that hoped we would open that door and find a frightened family who'd just been hiding. That would been simple, human, dotting, something we could help, for once. But another part of me, the part molded by weeks of ambushes, booby traps, and bodies in hedgerows, that part expected a German with his rifle already aimed at our chests. Fear is a strange judge. It convinces you that acting fast is the same as acting right. Kara took a breath and pushed the door open. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight. The smell hit me first, stale smoke mixed with something like damp wool. It took my eyes a moment to adjust. There was a bed, a wardrobe, a small table with a lamp, and someone was sitting in the far corner. At first, all I saw was the shape, a person hunched forward, elbows on their knees, head down, not moving, not reacting to us barging in. Kara took a step forward, rifle still up. "Hands where I can see them," he said, voice steady but tight. The figure didn't move. I felt something cold slip down my spine. We'd seen this before. Soldiers left wounded as bait, or civilians too shocked to respond. More than once, men in my company had let their guard down out of pity and paid for it. "Kara," I said quietly, "wait." But he'd already gone 2 steps further, close enough that he could see more clearly than I could. He whispered something then, so soft I almost didn't hear it. Oh God, I should vev to him. Should be looked for myself right then. But I hesitated. And that pause, that single, cowardly pause, became the dividing line of my life. There's one part of this I avoided remembering for years, and it starts with the moment Kerr turned back toward me, eyes wide with something I still don't have a word for. "Get over here," he said. "You need to see this." I did go forward then, but already too late for the thing I should done first. Too late to stop what was coming next. I stepped past Kerr, the boards soft under my boots, and finally saw the person in the corner clearly. It was a German soldier, or rather, a boy wearing a German uniform. 16, maybe 17, at most. His helmet lay on the floor beside him, his blonde hair matted to his forehead with sweat. His rifle was on the ground too, leaning uselessly against the wall. His hands hung limp between his knees. His eyes were open, but they weren't focused on us, and they weren't focused on anything. He was alive, barely, breathing in these thin, shallow gasps, each one sounding like it could be the last. A dark stain spread across his chest and side, not fresh, not hours old either. He'd been bleeding a long time. Kerr lowered his rifle first. "Jesus," he whispered. "He is just a kid." I felt something twist in my stomach. I wanted to say the same thing, but the words wouldn't come. I kept my rifle up without meaning to. Habit, fear, training. Take your pick. War teaches you that hesitation is dangerous. But looking at that boy, half conscious and barely able to lift his head, the rifle in my hands felt suddenly heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Kara knelt down beside him. I should have stopped him, told him to be careful, told him to wait. But he moved with a quiet certainty, like he couldn't bear the thought of leaving that kid alone like that. The boy's lips moved, a dry sound, like a breath caught halfway. Kara leaned closer. "Do you understand English?" he asked gently. No answer, just the boy's eyes flickering for a moment. Not with recognition, but with pain. Kerr looked over his shoulder at me. He needs water. Star. Orders are to clear the house, I said. We're supposed to. I know what we're supposed to do, Kerr snapped, though even his anger was hushed. But he's dying. There was a moment, a small private moment, where I felt torn clean in two. Part of me wanted to back out of that room, keep my distance, pretend this wasn't our responsibility. Another part wanted to kneel beside Kerr and help the boy. But a third part, the part shaped by every burned-out farmhouse and every body left behind in a ditch, whispered that helping him could get us both killed. Fear doesn't shout, it whispers. And I listened. We don't know if he's alone, I said. Could be others around. Kerr didn't look at me. He just shook his head, frustrated, and reached into his canteen pouch. That's when the boy's hand twitched. Not much. Just enough to reach weakly toward Kerr's wrist, like he was trying to say something. His fingers brushed Kerr's sleeve. Kerr froze, then let out this breath, shaky, but soft. It's okay, Kerr said, almost to himself. We're not going to hurt you. I felt the room tightening around me, a pressure I couldn't name, because at that moment, I realized, if anyone walked in, our squad, our lieutenant, this would look very, very bad. Aid the enemy, they'd say. Don't touch him. Move on. Follow the mission. I stared at the boy, his face pale, his uniform stiff with dried blood, and I knew, even then, that this moment was leading somewhere we couldn't take back. Only later did I understand what we had really done. But the next moment, the one that changed everything, began with a single sound outside the farmhouse. Boots in the mud. More than one pair. Coming closer. Kerr looked at me, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. If they found us like this, if they saw Kerr kneeling beside an enemy soldier, well, then, some decisions are made for you. I just didn't know which one of us would pay for it. The sound of those boots coming up the path was steady, deliberate. Not hurried like civilians fleeing, not heavy like armor troops. Just a calm, rhythmic march. American. Dot me. Him do. He. American. Our own men. And somehow, that scared me more than any German patrol. Kerr rose halfway from his crouch, caught between instinct and intention. The boy in the corner tried to lift his head again, but it fell back against the wall. His breaths were growing shallower, almost silent now. I whispered, "Get back. Get away from him." Kerr shook his head sharply. "He's dying, that's all. He's not a threat." "That's not the point," I said. My voice sounded harsher than I meant. "If they find you here like this," he knew what I meant. The army didn't encourage mercy toward the enemy, not on the front line. Not when every act of kindness could be a trap. And we were already stretched thin, jittery, primed to expect the worst from anything in a field gray uniform. The boots drew closer, crunching through the gravel outside. 2 men, maybe 3. They were almost at the door. Kerr glanced back at the boy, then at me. His jaw clenched. He wasn't a disobedient man, not by nature, but he had this stubborn streak, a belief that right was right, even when the rules disagree. I used to admire that in him. Now, it frightened me. "He's just a kid," Kerr said under his breath. "So are a lot of them," I replied. "And it doesn't change anything." He didn't answer. He just looked down at his canteen, still in his hand, then back at the half-conscious boy. Kind of helplessness settled over his face, as if he were standing at the edge of a moral cliff and didn't know which way was falling. The boots stopped right outside the farmhouse. A voice called out, muffled, "Second squad checking in. Anyone in here?" We froze. I don't know why I didn't call back. I should have shouted, "Clear!" or something close enough, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could think about was how this room looked from the outside. Kerr kneeling beside a wounded German youth, his rifle slung, compassion overriding protocol, and me standing there, rifle drawn, watching it happen. The door hinges creaked. Someone was coming in. "Kerr," I hissed. "Move!" I stepped forward, grabbed his arm, and pulled him a few feet away from the boy. Not rough, but firm. He resisted at first, his eyes blazing with something I can't quite name even now. But he let me. Maybe he understood the danger. Maybe he didn't have the strength to argue. We hadn't gotten 2 feet before Sergeant Halpern appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by sunlight. He had that same permanent frown etched between his eyebrows, like every day of the war had carved another line there. He saw us. Then he saw the boy in the corner. His expression didn't change. Not at first. "What's this?" he said, voice flat. Before either of us answered, another pair of boots entered behind him. I opened my mouth. I don't know what I planned to say. Something that would make it sound routine. Procedure. Neutral. Alt. But Kerr beat me to it. "He is wounded," Kerr said. "He needs water." Halpern's gaze shifted to him. Slow, deliberate, like he was weighing Kerr's words grain by grain. "We aren't medics," Halpern said, "and he isn't our responsibility." Kerr's shoulders went rigid. I felt mine do the same. The boy made a faint sound. Not a word, not even a groan, just air fighting through a failing body. Halpern didn't look at him again. He turned his attention to me. "You check the rest of the house?" he asked. "Yes, Sergeant." "And this one's the only occupant?" "Yes." Halpern nodded once. "Then finish it." I felt my stomach drop. Kerr inhaled sharply. "Sergeant," Kerr said. "Yes, he's not a threat." Halpern didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just said, calmly, "He's still the enemy." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. That pressure in my chest, the one I'd been pushing aside since we walked into the farmhouse, came roaring back. Kerr looked at me then, his expression raw. Not angry, not pleading, just searching, as if he believed I could fix this, as if I would. "I wish I could tell you I said something brave, or wise, or right, but all I did was stay silent. And that silence, that one moment of cowardice, is the part of this story I still haven't forgiven myself for." Halpern stepped further into the room, each of his boots pressing into the floorboards with the weight of certainty. He wasn't cruel, not in the way some officers were. He didn't spit when he said enemy, didn't relish the authority he held. He was simply a man shaped by the job he'd been given, the job he'd chosen. To complete the mission and bring back as many of his own men as he could. But that was exactly why what he said next hit like a hammer. "Put him out of his misery," Halpern said. "We move in 2 minutes." Kerr looked like someone had struck him across the face. His mouth opened, then closed, twice. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "Sergeant," Kerr said, the hesitation trembling behind every syllable. "There must be a way to." "There isn't." Halpern's voice was final, not harsh. "He won't make it long enough for medics, and we can't carry him. You know that." I did know. We both did. But knowing something doesn't always make it bearable. Halpern turned to leave, already done with the conversation, already ready to tell the next squad the farmhouse was clear. He trusted us to follow through, trusted the machine we were part of, trusted that men under his command would do what was necessary. Kerr took half a step forward, Sergeant, I don't think. Halpern stopped in the doorway, but he didn't turn around. I gave an order, Private. Just that. Then he disappeared back into the hall. The second soldier, who had come in with him, lingered for a moment. A kid named Foster, barely older than the German boy in the corner. He looked from me to Kerr, uncertainty written all over his face. You need help with it? Foster asked quietly. No, I said too quickly. We've got it. Foster nodded, relieved, and followed Halpern out. The farmhouse fell silent again, except for the boys' ragged breaths. Kerr stared at the doorway long after Halpern left. I could see the muscles in his jaw working, the thoughts grinding in his head. The kind of thoughts no soldier wants to say out loud. Finally, he spoke. This isn't right. Kerr. No, he said again, sharper. This isn't right, and you know it. I didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. And yet, the weight of the order hung in the air between us like a third presence in the room. Kerr wiped a hand over his mouth, then looked at the boy, really looked at him, not as a uniform or a threat or a line in a report, but as a person, a child who'd been sent into a war neither of us fully understood. He's scared, Kerr whispered. Look at him. I wasn't sure the boy was aware enough to feel anything at that moment. His eyes were half closed, his breaths more shallow by the second. But I didn't say that. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Instead, I found myself repeating Halpern's logic, like a man clinging to a lifeline he knows is fraying. We can't carry him. Medics are a mile back. We're pushing forward. Kerr's eyes flicked to mine, full of disbelief. Since when do you hide behind rules? I'm not, because that's what you're doing. He stepped closer, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something in his expression that bordered on anger. You know he doesn't deserve this, Kerr said. You know it. A cold, sharp fear crawled into my chest. Not fear of the boy, not fear of Germans outside, but fear of what Kerr might do next. I lowered my voice. Kerr, don't do anything stupid. He stared at me for a long moment. I could almost hear the thoughts churning inside him. The clash between conscience and obedience, between human instinct and military command. Then he said something I've replayed in my head 1,000 times since. If you won't stop this, then I will. Those words settled in the room like dust, and before I could respond, before I could even reach for him, Kerr turned toward the boy in the corner. Not to harm him, but to protect him. And that was the moment when everything began to unravel. Kerr moved before I understood what he intended. He went to the boy and knelt beside him again, placing one steadying hand on the dirt floor, as if bracing himself against a decision he'd already made. Kerr, I said quietly. Think. But I am thinking, he replied, but his voice shook. He unscrewed his canteen with slow, careful fingers and lifted the boy's head just enough to pour a thin stream of water across his lip. Most of it dribbled down the boy's chin. A little made it into his mouth. The boy swallowed weakly. It was almost nothing, a gesture so small it shouldn't have mattered. And yet, in that moment, it felt like a line had been crossed, a line I wasn't sure we'd be able to step back over. You're going to get yourself in trouble, I whispered. He's dying, Kerr said. Trouble doesn't matter. It does, if Halpern finds out. Kerr didn't flinch. Then he finds out. Outside, I could hear the squad shifting, gathering, preparing to move forward again. The rustle of gear. Halpern's voice calling positions. The war was still happening, still advancing, and we were falling behind. I felt torn clean in two. Part of me knew Kerr was right, that what he was doing was human, simple, decent. Another part knew the army wouldn't see it that way. not with wounded enemy combatants, not on active advance. I lowered my rifle, letting the barrel point toward the floor. Kerr, we don't have time for this. He didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the boy's blanket. A torn piece of curtain had found, and laid it lightly over the kid's chest. Then he looked up at me, and what I saw on his face wasn't defiance. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was disappointment. You can't just shut it off, Kerr said quietly. Not everything. I'm not shutting anything off, I said. But the words came out thin. He shook his head. You are. I can see it. The accusation felt heavier than any order Halpern could be given. Before I could respond, Halpern's voice carried through the open doorway. Move out. Front squad takes the road. Second squad flanks left. We were out of time. Kerr looked at the boy, then at me one last time, not pleading, not bargaining, just waiting to see what I would choose. I'm not leaving him like this, Kerr said. A cold knot formed in my stomach. He wasn't bluffing, and I knew exactly what Halpern would do if we fell behind, or disobeyed, or openly defied an order. Kerr, I tried again, softer this time. Don't make this harder. He closed his canteen with a click that echoed in the quiet farmhouse. I'm staying, he said. The words hit harder because they were so calm. Outside, the footsteps grew distant as the squads started moving. We were seconds from being left behind. Kerr, I said, nearly a plea now. If we don't go, we'll be... He cut me off gently. I know. And then he looked down at the boy, his face tightening with a mix of resolve and fear. Someone has to do the right thing, he murmured. I felt something inside me twist, a painful, tightening pull between loyalty, duty, and the smallest spark of conscience I was trying so hard to smother. And that's when I realized something else. Whatever happened next, nothing between us would ever be the same, and I still hadn't decided which side of that line I was going to stand on. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen between two worlds. The one where I followed the order, and the one where Kerr followed his conscience. Maybe it was only a few seconds, long enough for the cold air from the doorway to brush against my face, long enough for Halpern's voice to fade as the squad moved on, long enough for my heart to start pounding in the quiet. Kerr was still kneeling beside the boy, his shoulders stiff, like he was bracing for whatever would come next. From me, from the army, from fate, the boy's breaths came shallow and uneven. Each one sounded farther away. We can't stay here, I whispered finally. Then go, Kerr said. Not angry, just tired. I'm not stopping you. That hurt more than if he'd shouted. Outside, the last boots crunched in the frost as our unit disappeared beyond the hedgerow. The farmhouse felt even smaller now, like the walls were closing in around the three of us. You know what Halpern will say, I warned. I know, Kerr replied. You will be written up. Maybe. You could be court-martialed. Silence. Then, quietly. If that's the cost, then that's the cost. His voice didn't tremble this time. Something inside me snapped tight. A coil of fear, loyalty, instinct, and something deeper I didn't want to name. I felt the weight of the rifle in my hands, the weight of the order, the weight of the boy's fading breaths. You're putting me in a bad spot, I said. Kerr finally met my eyes. I'm not putting you anywhere. You choose where you stand. It was the gentlest thing he'd said, and the most devastating, because he was right. Every moment of my training, every drill sergeant, every handbook, every shouted command told me one thing: follow the order, end it quickly, move on. But every quiet part of me, the part I kept buried, whispered something different. He's just a child. And Kerr is right. And you know it. I looked down at the boy. His eyelids fluttered once, like he was fighting to stay tethered to the world. I didn't know if he knew we were there. I don't know if he felt anything at all. But the sight of him, small, pale, barely holding on, tore at something I'd tried so hard to keep sealed. The moment stretched. A crossroads laid out in front of me. If I followed the order, I'd lose a piece of myself. And maybe Kerr too. If I stayed, I'd be defying everything the army built into me. Please, Kerr said quietly, the first time he'd used that word all day. Just don't let him die alone. I closed my eyes. The wind outside shifted. The farmhouse creaked. My breath felt too loud in my chest. And then, from somewhere far beyond the tree line, came a sound we both recognized instantly. Distant gunfire. Our squad had made contact. Kerr's head jerked up. My fingers tightened around my rifle. The choice that had felt agonizing a moment ago now felt impossible. If we didn't move soon, we'd be cut off completely. And staying behind in enemy territory, that wasn't mercy. That was suicide. Kerr knew it. I knew it. His face shifted, resolve cracking into fear, then back again. Go, Kerr said. Just go. I'll catch up. But he wouldn't, and we both knew it. Outside, the gunfire grew louder. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, and that was the moment, right there, when I made the choice that has followed me for the rest of my life. But I'm not ready to say what it was. Not yet. Because the consequences didn't arrive until a few seconds later, when something happened at that doorway that I still see every night when I close my eyes. I left the farmhouse that day. I didn't turn back. I followed the sound of our squad moving through the fields, hearts pounding, rifles heavy, boots sinking into the mud. The boy, the German boy, remained behind with Kerr. That much I knew, and that much I carried with me every step of the way. I wanted to tell myself it was the only choice, that leaving was necessary to survive, that if I had stayed, all of us would have died. But the truth is simpler and far heavier. I left. I left him. I don't know exactly what happened after that. I never asked. I never knew if he lived another hour, another day, and I never wanted to know. Kerr didn't speak to me for weeks afterward. Not angry, not blaming, just distant. I understood that even then, the fracture wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet. Not permanent, invisible to anyone else. But I felt it every time we marched, every time the gunfire began again, every time I tried to sleep. The war ended eventually. We returned home. We were lauded. We were thanked. I shook hands, got medals, kissed wives and girlfriends. But I carried that silence, that choice, like a stone in my chest. Decades later, I can still see the farmhouse. I can still see Kerr kneeling there, canteen in hand, trying to do what was right. And I can still see myself, frozen by fear, turning away. I've never spoken of it. Not to family, not to friends, not to priests or therapists. Only here because the years have stretched long enough that if I don't confess, we'll take it with me. And I think that's the cost of some wars. They don't end with a surrender or a flag lowered. Some wars end quietly, in choices you can't undo, in moments where courage failed you, in the echo of a child's breath you could not save. I am old now. My hands shake. My mind drifts easily into memory. And I know one thing for certain. Survival is a poor excuse when weighed against the life you leave behind. Would you have done differently? Could obedience ever truly equal innocence? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. The only answer I can give is the one I carry in silence. The war ended long ago, but the quiet cost, the moral weight of what we didn't do, lasts a lifetime. And for me, it never will end.